I think some really good tips for parents and professionals are good to have. And I wanted to say first and foremost that it's never too early to begin planning for the adult life. I believe we started when Jacob was 5 years old. We started planning for his adult life. If you know what you want in the future, it's a lot easier to put the plans underneath it. And if you think about it, we do this with our kids without disabilities. You know, we think, well, they're going to go to college someday. You know, if your family is academically oriented like that, and so you plan all through their lives for that ending of their education, and you work toward it. And so starting with children with disabilities as early as possible is equally important. Having a future dream in mind can help drive the supports needed. An example is that when Jacob was 5 years old, we said in his person-centered planning meeting, or I said that I wanted him to live in his own home in our neighborhood, if possible. And you know, people kind of poo-pooed that idea. Even my husband thought I was kind of crazy, but you know, this was 1989, so it was a long time ago. And we talked about it at every person-centered plan and every school meeting we talked about it as his future. And the plans came to fruition, and he lives in his own home in the neighborhood now. And I truly believe it's because we were planning for that from the very beginning, for him to have the best life he could possibly have. Another tip would be to work with the individual in the environment in which they're most comfortable when you're doing any kind of evaluation or meeting with the individual. If you are working with an infant or toddler, having them come to a clinic to get a good look at them is not going to give you the same amount of rich information you'll get if you go into their home or into their childcare situation, wherever it is they spend the most time, because you're going to create an artificial environment for them if you bring them to you. If you go to them, you'll see them in their natural environment with the people there that they usually have around them, with their toys and their things that they interact with, and they will act more normally. This is true of any kind of assessment, and it's a basic tenet of assessment is that being in the natural environment, doing a naturalistic observation is going to give you much richer information. By the same token, an adult with disabilities, you should see them in their own environment as well, whether it be at school or at home. Bringing them to a clinic or somewhere else for an assessment, you can get information, but you're not going to get the same kinds of information. You get much richer information by going to them. Another tip would be for the team who's doing the assessment to fully collaborate as much as possible. Typically what we see is different specialists bring different assessment instruments and do them individually with the person who's being assessed. And with that, you get some kind of fragmented information, fragmented reports, fragmented goals and objectives, and everybody seems to be sort of working on their own thing. It makes much more sense if everyone sort of assesses the person together. It doesn't fatigue the child or the adult, especially our kids with charge can have a lot of fatigue. It doesn't wear out the family, which I can say as a mother, it's a very important thing to take into consideration. And also, you know, if I'm watching the OT do some assessment things, I may pick up some things that I see cognitively because I would typically do the cognitive assessment. And the OT may see things as I'm doing a cognitive assessment that they wouldn't normally see otherwise. And so everyone just gets a lot more information this way. Then when you come together and discuss all of your assessment information that you all obtained at the same time or all together or collaboratively, you can then put together collaborative goals and objectives as well. I worked with some students who were brothers recently, and their father really, really wanted them to spend more time together. And so when we looked at the educational plans of these two brothers, they went to the same school. The physical therapist and the speech therapist came together to work with both brothers together and had them do activities together where they spoke to each other or signed to each other and did physical activities that they both enjoyed together. And so the goal of getting more socialization within the family was met at the same time as the physical therapy and the speech therapy goals. And it was just really wonderful. And it was all done in one session instead of everybody doing everything separately. It can really work well. One other tip I would say is to meet regularly. When you meet, make sure the individual is always there, so the focus is on them. I have to say, occasionally with Jacob, we didn't have Jacob at the meetings, but by this time we all knew where the focus was, and it was not an issue. But especially at, large administrative or school team meetings, having the individual there so that everybody has their face right in front of them helps to keep the focus on that individual. And secondly, meet regularly, follow up with plans. So often our educational plans get filed away in a file cabinet and you say, there, we've done that one for the year. We don't have to think about it again. And even though people have their goals and objectives to work on, they really don't go back and pull that out and look at it again. The best kinds of teams are the teams that meet regularly and brainstorm and talk about issues that each one is having with the child. They come up with suggestions together, new activities, and these teams also include the families. For my son, we had team meetings every month throughout his school career. When he was in primary school, we often had them weekly, and these included the major team members, the teacher, the special ed teacher, the speech pathologist, myself, and anyone else who was regularly involved, just to talk about issues, how things were working, how could we support the general ed teacher, because Jacob was fully included in his school. And by the time he graduated from secondary school here in the US, we were still meeting every month just to tweak things and change things and work on his transition. And it just worked out really well. I always knew everybody was working on things the way that we all decided. Nobody forgot things. We had minutes of the meetings. And if you can get the personnel to work together that way, it really works great.